of Perilous lore. We are back. I say we because you might be wondering if you're watching the video, Dan, why aren't you centered in your own camera, you dummy? Why is there an empty chair next to you? That is because I do have a special guest this week. Dani will be joining me once the baby goes to sleep. She's putting the kid down for a nap, but I got to get started now because it's a crazy Sunday and we got too much stuff going on. So, we're going to be talking about Tomb Kings today. Everybody's favorite faux Egyptian undead. Love these guys. Always love the look of them. Had an army briefly. We do have some models to show off this week, kind of for funsies. So I want to kind of skip the what's gaming for right now until Dani gets down here and kind of talk a little bit about things that are going on. It's been a pretty quiet gaming-wise around here lately. Some people got like married and stuff, and we have other weddings coming up. So it's been a little lax in the gaming area the last few weeks, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about Tomb Kings, the land of the dead, Nehekhara. Always love that name. Cool stuff. So, you might be wondering, well, what are Tomb Kings? What are we even talking about here? So these are like where the undead came from in the Warhammer world. They have really cool, deep lore that goes back literally thousands of years. A lot of good stuff for that, which kind of brings me to my Black Library recommendation of the week I want to start with, which is called Nagash the Sorcerer by Mike Lee. Same guy who wrote the Darkblade series of Malice Darkblade, the Dark Elf I talked about way back, I think, in the first episode about elves. But Nagash the Sorcerer is the first of a trilogy. These are the Time of Legends books. They were kind of similar. Were in the same vein as the Horus Heresy books for 40K, where they were a bit more like... I viewed them as like higher level literary pieces, as opposed to like most people think of Warhammer books as like just action smut kind of thing, and not, like lowbrow fiction, which I don't think is totally fair to that stuff. People obviously put a lot of work into those books, and most of them are very, very good. But the Time of Legends was supposed to be a bit more a higher brow, a bit more literary, as opposed to just tie-in fiction. So they had some of them won awards. The Heldenhammer, the what do they call it? The Time of Sigmar series, the second book of that, called Empire, won some awards for like in the fiction categories, which was pretty cool. Nagash, there's Nagash the Sorcerer, Nagash the Broken, and I just looked this up earlier, but now I can't remember. But yeah, there's three. I forget what the last one is. Nagash the Tamed or something like that. But Nagash the Sorcerer tells the story of Nagash himself, which we'll go into a little bit later on in the show. This is a cool story, going way back in time. This is, thousands of years before the Empire. At least over 1,500 years before the time of the Empire. We're talking the time of Nagash was... I can look it up real quick in my book here if I can find it quick enough. Nagash was... Why doesn't it give a time there? Other ones it has, like, when this took place. Alcatazar was circa negative 1,200. Oh, that's annoying. So between 2,500 and 1,200 years before the Empire. Let's just put a huge range there. But we'll talk a lot more about Nagash going forward. He is probably the most important figure in Nehekhara. So what is Nehekhara? Where is Nehekhara? What's going on here? So I got my map of the Land of the Dead from this book. Ooh. This was the 5th or 6th edition of Warhammer Fantasy. This is from 2002. Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Really cool book. I love that one in particular. They didn't get another book until 8th edition, I believe, or 7th edition. They got a hardcover book later on, but we actually had this army back in the day. It was originally my brother's, as usual, and he actually sold it to Dani, and she played them for a while, but she didn't like how they worked. She didn't like that the soldiers were bad, but they were still expensive because they were undead. And eventually, we did sell that army online on eBay years ago. I think maybe not more than 10 years. I can't remember if it was when I where we currently live or before then, but it was quite a long time ago. So we had sold that book with it at the same time. So I still have the old book, but not the newest one. But here, if you're watching the video version of this, we have the Land of the Dead up on the screen. And this is quite far south of the Empire. If you go south through the Blackfire Pass, past the Gray Mountains, the Black Mountains, you get to the Border Princes. If you continue south, you get to the Badlands, which is pretty much overrun with orcs. If you continue south, this is... if you compare it to our world, which is pretty easy to do with the Warhammer map, we're talking, like Egypt, very northern Africa, a bit into like the Middle East, what would be like Saudi Arabia and Israel, Iraq, that kind of stuff. So the Land of the Dead, again, it's very, very deep lore. There's a lot to it. We have places like Qatar. I always loved that name. With the Palace of Corpses now. We have Numas. We have Lamia, which is very important. We have Marak, Liberus, and of course, Khemri. Oh, and Zandri, the port city. And then Khemri, where the Black Pyramid of Nagash is. Like I said, we'll talk more about that later on. But the Land of the Dead wasn't always called that, of course. It was just called Nehekhara for a long time. It was this for most of its history, it was very prosperous nation. It was very powerful. They had grand armies. Once people had kind of joined the disparate nations of the land together, and Khemri became the capital of that region, and that was because of the first king of Nehekhara, Settra, who is now known as Settra the Imperishable, which we'll get to, and he was there. He was kind of like the Sigmar of Nehekhara, where he united these different cities of Numas and Qatar and all the way to Lamia and Zandri, and he was able to bring them all under his banner. And although he was kind of a tyrant, he was pretty much awful, and he was incredibly influential and powerful. He was actually made his land prosperous and made Nehekhara incredibly powerful. It just wasn't exactly a happy land. People didn't like what he did, but it worked in its way. But Settra, in his arrogance and pride, he was super proud of what he accomplished, but he was always upset that he was not going to be able to experience it forever, that he was going to die eventually, and all that would be passed on was his name and his deeds. He wanted to live through it all. So he had his priests of their various gods, like Petra, I think is how you say it, is their sun god, and things like that. Aspis and others. And he said he wants to figure out ways to make him immortal, of course. So he had all these priests that could do magic, work on this, and they were able to extend his life quite a long time. He lived hundreds of years, but he didn't quite make it to immortality, and he did eventually die. And when he did, they performed certain rites and cast certain spells on him to make it so he wouldn't degrade like a dead body should, and that someday he could come back. Kind of kept his soul in his body, basically, which is kind of cool. But he did not achieve immortality at that time. So Nehekhara continues on, doing okay for way back when, for about 1,000 years, a little less, until we get to the time of Nagash. Nagash was awful. So I have another picture, the same as that image from the cover of the book, just in this case it's without like the title and everything, and a bit bigger. And Nagash was the jealous younger brother of the king at that time. Hello!
Hi. Can I join you?
Of course.
Sweet.
I had started the video saying, why do I have all this space next to me? Because I do have a guest.
And here I am.
Here she is.
Hi.
So I'm talking about Nagash.
Okay.
And how he kind of continued on Settra's desire to live forever. Settra being the first king of Nehekhara.
Yes.
And Nagash was a powerful sorcerer, but he wasn't happy with just becoming the high priest of Nehekhara, which he did, which is a super respectful place to be. Basically right up there with the king, who happened to be his brother. So what do you think he did?
He killed him.
He killed him. Of course he did. He killed his brother and just took over the throne and was like, come at me. Like, I'm the best.
Yeah.
And he was kind of right. And he was even more self-centered and egotistical than Settra was, where he forced his people to build the Black Pyramid of Nagash. Which, again, if you're watching the video, we have it in the image here. I think it's under construction in this picture, and it was the biggest pyramid in Khemri yet, in all of Nehekhara at this time. And he basically drove the nation into the ground because of his hubris, and everything had to be about Nagash. He didn't care about what happened to the people, so he was bringing in all these slaves and forcing them to bring this black stone from far, far away, and it just ruined everything. So all the other leaders were like, we can't have this. If we're going to be a nation, we can't have this despot just ruining everything.
Talk about a vanity project.
Right?
Seriously.
Literally.
Despot is such a good word to describe him, too.
I like that word a lot. So they all joined forces and marched against Nagash. Little did they know, he was such a powerful sorcerer that he invented necromancy. Yeah. So they marched upon Khemri and the Black Pyramid, which is basically, he kind of moved the throne of power from the city of Khemri to his pyramid across the river, and they marched upon him with their legions of armies, and he marched back with skeletons, and they were like, wait, what?
Right?
What is this? And
Wolf.
they almost lost right there, because people were just like, they'd never seen this before. It was the first time ever that somebody had raised the dead like this, which is super cool and shows how powerful he was. Like, he literally invented a new kind of magic.
Yeah. I hate him so much that he has so much potential for, like, awesomeness, and he's just so self-centered that he can't, you know, have a good, I mean, I don't think that there ever really would be, like, a good end goal, but for a person like that. But it's just like, he could have done so much.
Right? He did do so much, but what he did was awful.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so they marched upon and almost lost immediately, but with their combined might and the power of their generals, how good they were able to overcome this, and they were able to strike Nagash down at this point. He disappeared during the battle and was gone, but they were able to beat him. The Black Pyramid of Nagash was abandoned. It kind of became like this, you don't go near there. Kind of like that spooky house that the kids go investigate in every kid horror movie, like It. Exactly. So it was completely abandoned, and Nehekhara kind of continued on. Again, they were like, okay, at least we dodged that bullet.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over in Lamia, the city of Lamia, which should sound familiar to anybody that has spent much time in the Warhammer world. Nagash at this point had perfected his immortality rites and spells, and he had created this elixir of life, he called it, which made him undead. Which I'll bring up what he became. Oh, that's the wrong picture. Here we go. Nagash Undead, where he became this incredibly mighty undead monstrosity. He's like 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
He has this gigantic sword. He has the books of Arcane about him and everything. And he became this incredibly powerful necromancer, lich, whatever. But while he was kind of in hiding, building his strength back up, he had like thralls around the empire, people that worshipped him basically already. And one of them was, I always get her name wrong, so I want to double check I'm getting it right. I believe it was Queen, because she changed her name partway through, so I can never remember. But I believe it is Queen, I'll just say Queen Nehekhara. I think that's what she becomes. She had a slightly different name before that. Queen Nehekhara and her high priest were able to like remake the elixir that Nagash had made. But they didn't make it perfect, of course. They weren't as good as Nagash. So what they did was imperfect, and it granted them immortality, but they also needed to like feed that immortality with blood.
Right.
And they became the first vampires. Super cool. Love them. Yes, Nehekhara. This is what she became. I thought this had her other... I can't remember her other dude's name, but she became the first vampire, and I'm going to talk more about vampires in the next episode, but essentially she started like a rebellion against the other nations, and she was able to raise some undead as well, but that the king of the time, King I always say his name wrong too because I always want to say Alcazadar, but that's not right. I always switch the D and the Z's. Alcadazar. I was right. Okay, never mind. King Alcazadar.
Okadazar?
Alcadazar. Why can't I say that?
Alphabetical. It's alphabetical. D before Z.
Whew. I mean, if people have listened to other episodes of this show, they know I can't pronounce things
Yeah.
without slowing it down. And like, I feel like I'm on a Hooked on Phonics commercial.
You're consistent.
Alcadazar.
Je suis la Juvie.
He, again, united a few different nations and marched upon Lamia because they'd heard about their court of blood, I think they called it. And that was when she created all the first vampires of the different bloodlines. Like her captain of the guard became the first blood dragon. And then because he set up like special rules. Like if we have to do this to survive, we will, but we can't break these tenets. And others didn't follow those rules and whatnot. Like I said, next episode I'll go talk about the different vampire bloodlines because I think they're really cool in Warhammer with the Lamians, the Blood Dragons, the Strigoi, the Von Karsteins.
Yeah.
I feel like there's another one now I can't remember. Oh, the Necrex. No.
You're going to go into it next time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to read more about it next time.
Yep.
But Alcadazar marched upon Lamia and kind of struck them down and was like, nope, you're done. And she fled basically north to what would become the Empire and started her bloodline of vampires, the Lamians, which are all about beguiling and seducing and things like that. They're not so much fighty vampires.
Love it.
They're very cool. And again, things were okay for a little while until Nagash came back again.
Right.
And Alcadazar was like, well, crap. Nagash decided what he tried last time didn't work. He knew Alcadazar was too good of a general. And he wouldn't be able to defeat him in the field of battle with the armies that he had. So he thought, you know what I'm going to do is just take out those armies not on the field of battle. So he pulled a Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, and he poisoned their main river.
Did he poison the water hole?
He did.
Did
Yeah.
he put snakes in their boots?
He would have if he could, yeah. So same the analogous to our river Nile, they poison. I think it's called the River Vitae, which just means life. Poisoned that, and 90% of the people of Nehekhara were killed.
Whoa.
By this. So like, not only did King Alcadazar lose his children and his wife that he named Khalida after Queen Khalida of Lamia, he lost 90% of his armies.
Yeah.
So then Nagash rolled in with his undead legions. At this point, Nagash is this undead thing. I'm pretty sure he's undead at this point. No, he's not. Never mind. He's still a mortal person, but just he can't. He's immortal, but not an undead yet.
Okay.
He rolls in with his undead forces and just wrecks Alcadazar. He had no chance at this point. He takes Alcadazar captive and brings him back to the Black Pyramid. Nagash sets himself back up in there, and he starts working on this grand ritual. Because at this point, he's like, all right, I can't trust living people because they keep messing up or they keep going against me. So I'm just going to make everybody in this region undead, and I can control them that way. So he conducts this giant ritual, which is supposed to kill everybody in Nehekhara and then raise them back. While he's in the middle of this ritual, somebody sets King Alcadazar free. Somebody says they're described as hunched figures in heavy cloaks, and they give him this blade of super magical powers. We talked about this way back in like episode 5 or 6. It's pretty well known through different clues and different sources that it was Skaven, and they gave him the dreaded Fell Blade. And he left the hip where he was captive, found Nagash performing his ritual. He had just finished it, unfortunately. But because he had just finished it, he was in this weakened state from manipulating these huge magics. So Alcadazar fought him, and they said it was this epic clash that took hours. And finally, Alcadazar slew Nagash with this blade and then disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to him after that. Which we can pretty well assume that the Skaven probably just took him with the blade or something.
Right.
But there's nothing else in the lore about what happened to that king. And I love that story because it's so tragic that this guy, he was the best king Nehekhara had in a long time. Like, Nehekhara was very prosperous because of Alcadazar, and then he got screwed by this undead maniac.
Yeah, well,
So Nagash disappeared from history for a long time. He briefly came back in Sigmar's time when he found the crown of Nagash and tried to overtake Altdorf, but Sigmar was able to fight him off. And then not till the end times did Nagash come back in full power, and he became like one of the most powerful things in the world. But we don't talk about the end times here. It didn't really happen.
Not in this house.
Nope. There's like no cats in this house, no end times in this house.
Yep.
So that's kind of the basic history of Nehekhara. A lot of cool characters. During his ritual, Nagash's, when he brought everybody back, anybody that ever died and were like still had their body intact rose from the dead at this point, which was hundreds of Tomb Kings from throughout the thousands of years of their history, including Settra. He came back and he woke up and he was like, "What is this crap? This is not what I was promised. I was promised to come back to a golden paradise because I was the best king ever." Obviously,
Right.
He was so mad, and he just kind of marched out because of all all of his own sorceries and what was done to him. And as he died, he was the most powerful of the Tomb Kings that reawoke, and a bunch of them were fighting over who's going to be in charge of Khemri, all because there were tons buried in Khemri. They had lots of kings over the years.
Imagine that political unrest.
Right.
Like, no, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. What?
Right. So.
All right, Grandpa, sit down.
Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer.
So instead of like doing anything political about it, Settra just marched out there and just killed a whole bunch of lesser Tomb Kings. And he was like, "No, I'm the king. I'm the best." And they're all like, "Yeah, okay, I guess so."
Oh, okay.
So Settra became the leader of what's now the Land of the Dead, and he rules all of what they don't really call it Nehekhara anymore, but it kind of is, and it's this like black spot on the map. Or if you're traveling anywhere, you don't go anywhere near that place.
Heck yeah.
Because the Tomb Kings don't often march to war going anywhere. They're not Settra's not really interested in conquering more of the world or anything like that. But if anybody goes there, they will defend it with their undead, I don't almost say vigor, but kind of.
Yeah. Zeal.
Undead
There's
zeal.
zeal for undead.
Yeah.
Undeath.
Something like that. So they're more or less unstoppable on their own terms. So this cool picture. This is the whole like wraparound cover of the book I held up before, the 5th or 6th edition army book, where we see a Tomb King leading the skeletons to war, and their armies are made up of skeletons and skeletal archers and skeletal cavalry. They're really well known for their skeletal chariots.
Yeah, chariots were really good.
and
Certain
the-
types of archers were really good.
The archers were great. In the Fantasy Battles game, they had a rule where they just always hit on 5s. No, they didn't take any penalties or bonuses into account. The chariots were cool because they were the only army that could field units of chariots. They weren't as good individually as other races' chariots, but you could have 3 or 6, like a big block of chariots, which was really cool.
Just mow people down.
Yeah, really neat stuff. And because these armies are undead, they don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about fleeing. They don't have to worry about any kind of psychology.
Yeah.
They just march until everything is dead or they're destroyed.
Yep.
And then oftentimes the Lich Priests could just raise them back anyway. They could put them back together.
Yes.
But then Settra himself, he's now known as Settra the Imperishable. I love the look of this character. In the video version, I have a picture up of him right now from that army book, and I love how he has the light of Patra coming from his mouth. He's super powerful. He had the coolest chariot in the game that was drawn by 4 skeletal horses.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
So he looked awesome on the table, and he's cool. He's not a nice guy, but he's awesome.
No.
And I love that he hates Nagash.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah,
Nagash,
he's got an axe to grind.
right?
For sure.
Nagash is so closely intertwined with anything Nehekhara or Tomb Kings, but the leader of the Tomb Kings just hates him because he brought him back in a way that wasn't supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, you broke all the promises that were made. You ruined everything, you idiot. So he's trying to find Nagash, but he's been gone for since before Settra was raised, or right around the same time, really.
Yeah.
But speaking of Settra, I want to talk about some other important characters other than the King El-Kedazar. Got
There you
it.
go.
And Nagash.
Yeah.
One of our favorites, and one reason why Dani kind of got into Tomb Kings, I kind of already explained that. Like, my brother had the army, and you bought it for him super cheap. I think it was like $75.
I was trying to think, yeah, when I was putting Felix down, I was like, was it like 70 or 75? It was quite the bargain.
Yeah, it was like $75, and it was probably 2,000 points or so.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah,
in
it was
the
like
day.
a full army.
It was a good size thing. You'd added a little bit to it over the years,
Mm-hmm.
but it was all about Queen
Khalida.
Khalida.
Yes.
Which, when you ran her on the tabletop, you didn't usually run her as Queen Khalida with her rules. You just ran her as a Tomb King, and you said Tomb Queen, because why
Yep.
not? And what did you call her?
I called her Queen Cordelia. Yep.
We got her model here. Dani painted this model up.
So, this was, God, how many years ago?
A lot. It does.
lot of years ago.
Unfortunately, looking at it on the camera doesn't really do it justice, because it's quite good.
It's all right.
You got things like highlighting and shading down much quicker than most people did. And I love, she went with this cool purple and green scheme.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't ever get too much painted for that army, because you did a couple things and kind of gave up with the army as a whole and moved to Skaven.
It's crazy. The base says copyright 1995.
Yeah,
I've not had this since 95, but
no, they didn't make new bases for a long time.
Yeah.
But the Queen Khalida herself is probably from 2002 when this book came out, because her model was certainly that version of the army. So
Yes.
We probably got her in 2003 or 2004, because I think
Yeah,
it was one
I
of
definitely
the few
we
things
were
you
out of
got
high
yourself.
school.
That sounds right.
Yeah, we were definitely
So,
out
like-
of high school.
Okay, so
Yep.
after 2004.
Sure.
Very cool. That was really what brought you to that army, right?
Yes, there were so few female characters. Number one, love Tomb Kings because I love Egyptian stuff, like The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. Guilty pleasure. Don't at me.
No, that's a great
It's a great movie. It's so
Love
good.
it.
But I love everything like Egyptian. I just find the history fascinating. The culture is fascinating. So when Timmy had this army that he wasn't using, and Dan was like, "Please be into this with me because you are my girlfriend," I was like, "All right, I'll give this a shot." Like, cool Egyptian stuff. Like skeletons should be relatively easy to paint, I guess. Yeah.
Nowadays, the contrast, it would be super easy.
Yeah. And I loved that there was a female that I could run as like the leader of this army.
Right.
Because again, I don't think that there are still many like female characters.
They've gotten a
terms
lot
of-
better about it, especially in Age of Sigmar.
I remember they had the models with the girls with their boobies out. And I was like, wow, that's great. Like you have female models, but they're hypersexualized.
Right.
Cool. Thanks.
Luckily, they've also they don't do that at all anymore.
Yeah,
Which I
they're-
think is helps make the hobby more inclusive and
Yeah.
doesn't make people feel like uncomfortable.
Right. And it's not even uncomfortable. Sorry. Like, whatever, boobs, who cares? But it's like, seriously, like, this is just like, nudity for nudity's sake. It's
Right.
not.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, there's a female in the game, but she has to be partly naked.
Right.
to
Or
be-
like hypersexualized. So I love that, like, Khalida is, entirely, she's bound, you can't see, but she's like entirely like bound by her dressings and everything like that because, she was killed and then came back and you want me to
Yeah,
talk
you want
about
to tell
all
them
that?
the story?
Yeah.
Queen Khalida's story?
All right, so Queen Khalida was pretty bomb, and she's like, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but she's like blessed by the Asp Queen.
The Aspis.
The
Yeah.
Aspis.
Aspis was her name, but she was also often known as the Asp Queen.
Yeah. And so she was accused of some unsavory things by the woman who created vampire counts.
Yes, Queen Neferata.
Yeah, and so when Queen Neferata called her out at like a dinner party, Khalida was like, all right, let's do this. Like, let's have trial by combat. Let's go. And instead of electing a champion,
Just like in The Mummy.
literally, like, remember that scene in The Mummy where the two chicks fight?
That's pretty much what
Yep.
this was,
Yep.
except in this case, one of them was a vampire.
Right. And so Neferata defeated Khalida, but as she, like, I don't know, stabbed her or whatever, she bit her in the neck, drank some of her blood, then she bit her own tongue and, like, spit it in Khalida's mouth so that Khalida would come back as a vampire. And Khalida was like, oh, hell to the no, like, Asp Queen, whatever, goddess, help me out here. And the Asp Queen was like, you know what, you're great, I love you, okay, and like expelled that vampiriness from her
Yeah.
as she was dying, so she didn't come back as a vampire. So they
Turned her blood to poison,
yeah
which is
yeah
super cool.
yeah so they did like the normal burial rites, whatever. She's like seated in a throne with a ceremonial mask on, And then, when the time comes, when she's needed, when her people need her, she goes into battle, and she's got all kinds of cool rules. Like, she's got like a poison attack with her claws or whatever. You have to take a unit of archers, because like that was kind of her thing, is that she was really well known for archery during her time.
Yes.
But just such like a cool story of like, I don't even know, vengeance. I don't know.
Kinda, yeah.
But,
I
like-
liked that too. That she had to take archers, but they were better because they got poisoned attacks.
Yes.
All of their I think they're called bows of the goddess or something like that.
Yeah.
They all got poisoned attacks on their bows, which was super cool.
Yeah. So that was a pretty badass thing about her. So, and I just loved her. So I was like, I'm gonna run this chick.
Right. So then you just usually didn't field her as Khalida because she was really expensive.
She was 420 points.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I feel like most of the time you just ran her as a generic Tomb Queen.
Yes.
And
I called her a Tomb Queen. Like, people would be like, so who's your Tomb King? And I'm like, Tomb Queen. Thank
Tomb
you.
Queen Cordelia. I love that name.
Cordelia, is here to mess you up.
Very cool.
Such a snot.
Love it. I love it. So a couple other things I want to talk about with the Nehekharans, other than their characters, they have their Lich Priests, which are the only ones to technically survive Nagash's spell because they were kind of already dead. As liches. They had just kind of survived in their bodies. And beyond their raising of skeletons to do all these things, they had their elite skeletons, the Tomb Guard, which were really cool. They were adept at just one slice chopping people's heads off with their cool Kopesh blades. They also created all kinds of constructs, which are where I thought Tomb Kings really shined in the models and whatnot. Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
My favorites were the Ushabti.
Loved the Ushabti. They were so cool.
Which is funny, if you look up Ushabti in like actual Egyptian, I almost said lore, history, they were a real thing, but they were little tiny. Typically, they were like sculpted jars that the mummifiers would put the organs inside. But so they Warhammerized it and made them like 15-foot tall monsters with great weapons
So
that were
cool.
like constructed from things. They would take like the skull of an alligator and put it on. They would add other like human bones and do things to make them bigger and whatnot. And they were just super awesome. I love Ushabti.
Yep.
They were their monstrous infantry for the army, and they just looked cool. They had one with a bird head and with an alligator head and one with like a bull head, and they could do all kinds of different things that way, and they just look awesome. Later on, they gave them bows too.
Ooh.
You could have a unit with great weapons or bows. They had great bows, which was pretty neat. That was after we stopped playing, though. There were a couple of things I'd forgotten about to add pictures of that came later, like their cool snake riders and the war sphinx, other constructs. But your favorite construct
Yeah.
was pretty much everybody's favorite construct, the Bone Giant.
It's a bone giant.
So the other model Dani painted, we got to show off.
Yep.
Really nice job on
Hello.
him.
Hello.
I remember
he's
you
loose.
spent hours painting him. Yeah, he's got a weird little jiggle to him in the middle because he's got such a small contact point, but
Yeah.
it's still connected.
Everybody's got a little jiggle in the middle,
Right? Bone giants are awesome. And they weren't necessarily like giants that were raised up. Some cases they were, or they started with that, but then the Lich Priests added a bunch of stuff to them, gave them big weapons. Again, you could give them 2 weapons, a great weapon, or a bow, but the model only had 2 weapons. It was really weird that they never came out with models for those other options.
Yeah.
They also came out, eventually they had another like variant to the giant called the Hierophant. No, that's not right.
Yeah.
Hierophant was what we called the lead, like the highest
Oh,
priest.
right.
Oh, sorry. Now I can't remember.
Sycophant? No. that's
No,
not
it
right.
was something like that. It was another one that was like a giant statue that came to life and it could shoot lasers out of its eyes.
Why wasn't that around when we played?
Yeah, it didn't come out till the last book they got, but now I can't remember what it was called. Oh my gosh, it's like
You look that up. I'll talk about bone giants a little bit. So this guy, his name is Francis, and I would often field him with Cordelia. He was like her bodyguard, which I just love, like Francis and Cordelia. You know, it sounds cute, like a little Southern Belle couple. But the cool thing about the bone giants, like the Ushabti, is that they're these constructs. So even when they are defeated in battle, like they take the pieces back, and then they can reconstruct them through the magic. So just because it's killed or defeated in defeated in battle, they're just going to reuse it because they are the first recyclers.
hey, there you go.
You know.
I did look it up. I found it's called the Hero Titan.
Hero Titan.
But
You were
like
halfway there.
H-I-E-R, like it's spelled slightly differently.
Right.
Yeah, H-I-E-R-O Titan.
Right.
Which is why I thought it was Hero Fan. It was pretty close.
Yeah.
But the Hero Titan was the same kind of idea, but it was just like a big statue that came alive, and it was like shining with the light of Petra and stuff like that.
Cool.
So really cool. I love their constructs. The last construct I want to talk about that they have was my favorite, the Tomb Scorpion.
Yeah.
I love these things.
These models were a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I remember, their legs would fall off all the time
All
because
the
they were all
time.
metal and they were big and they had these big heavy claws. It looks like it's a scorpion, but it's not like, I love the lore that it's not just like a big scorpion. It's not just a big undead scorpion.
Right.
They built it out of wood, bone, metal that they could find, and they constructed this thing and they gave it like this weird like scarab death mask.
Yeah.
And they would just use them for war, and when they were done they would just stop and they would just stand there. So they would get buried by the sand. So they had these cool rules that came from below, where they
Yeah.
had better than Beastman ambush, and they would just pop up and attack things. And I love them in game. I did use them a couple times at the store. I remember there was one guy that got real mad at me. He was playing Chaos Warriors,
Okay.
and he had a Chaos Sorcerer in his back lines all by himself, and I was like, playing Tomb Kings, dude, I got stuff hidden below. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. So then like turn 2 or 3, I popped up my Tomb Scorpion and it went after his lone Chaos Sorcerer and killed him, of course, because they had Killing Blow, just snipped his head off.
This is when you have the Morgan Freeman voiceover. It was not fine.
And yeah, he got real mad, and it was like, you should have put him in a unit. You would have been fine.
And you warned him.
Yeah.
You were like, hey, just so you know, I have this thing that can do this thing. That's on you, buddy. I'm sorry.
I'm going to do this if you don't do something about it. So, oh well. It was like, I don't actually think I still lost that game, but I remember he got pretty upset about that. But Tomb Scorpions are super cool. They're model-wise, they were as big as, or not, if not bigger than the Giant.
Yeah.
The Giant's supposed to be like 30 feet tall. It's so funny. In the lore, they describe Ushabti as 3 times the height of a man. This is a Tomb Giant compared to Khalida, and it's only about twice as tall as her.
Yeah.
And so the Ushabti should be even bigger than the Tomb Giant model, and it's hero scale, they call it. It's not supposed to be totally accurate.
Scale.
But a Tomb Giant would be like 30, 40 feet tall. These things were massive.
Yeah, they were
and
huge.
the Tomb Scorpion was like that size, but horizontal. These big claws could snap multiple people at once. It had the poisonous tail. It was awesome.
It was really cool.
Love those things. Super cool. They also had the Necro Sphinx and the War Sphinx, were 2 variants of this giant construct, mostly made out of stone. That was it looked like it was centauroid. If it was the War Sphinx, it was like a sphinx, so it had this like kind of body of a lion, sort of, and then the torso looked like a person with like big scythe arms. Or you could just, I think it was the War Sphinx, it just, instead of a torso of a person on the front, just had this big bestial head, and it had a howdah on the back with a bunch of skeletons with bows and stuff.
Howdah.
Super cool. Was terrible in the game, but looked awesome. I remember my brother did get one of those just to paint up, and he painted it this like purple obsidian stone, and it was pretty cool looking. Those are really neat. And they did have those snake riders, I can't remember what they're called, where they had these big snake constructs that Tomb Guard would ride.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. But the last thing I want to talk about with the Tomb Kings here was I love this because it's so Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Casket of Souls. That's the wrong picture. Dang
That's
it.
the wrong picture.
Did it again. The Casket of Souls. Love this thing. So this was super cool unit, was one of their war machines. They also had the Screaming Skull catapult that threw flaming skulls at the enemy, and you could upgrade it with they
Skulls
literally
of
had
the foe.
Skulls of the Foe. Yeah, you could
Yes.
upgrade it to throw the skulls of the foe, and they would like take more penalties to like panic checks.
Yes.
Super cool. But the Casket of Souls was their other war machine that couldn't move, just stood in one place. It had 2 Tomb Guard guarding it, and it had a high Lich Priest like controlling it. So it was this really expensive centerpiece model, but it was so cool because not only was it a level 4 wizard, essentially, this higher Lich Priest, but it also had the casket you could open up. And when it opened, just like Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you were looking at it, you were probably dead. So the whole thing is that they keep the casket down in the tombs. And when a Tomb King was entombed, before all of Nagash's stuff, they like all of his people that would be entombed with him, this thing would basically suck their souls into it. And then whenever it's opened up on the battlefield, those souls would come out and they would like try to find nourishment from other souls. And they would eat other souls because they've been stuck inside this casket for so long and not being able to travel to like, you know, the afterlife or whatever in the Warhammer world. And they would come out and they would go, anything that was looking at it, they would go and they would like fly through them and try to bring their soul back to the casket. Super, super cool. I love this thing. And just, I mean, anything that references something like Raiders of the Lost Ark is just awesome.
Yeah.
I love the Casket of Souls. It was just a neat thing that was very Tomb Kings and very just cool. Whew. All right. Well, that's all we have for Tomb Kings. Is there anything else you wanted to add there?
No, fluff-wise. Hi, the Wargaming Dad.
Hello.
Fluff-wise, they're so cool. Like, the lore, everything about them is so cool. In action, though, not a fan.
Yeah, on the tabletop, they were pretty much consistently disappointing.
Yeah.
Their last book they got was just not good. They were okay at first because they were one of the first books that came out that edition, and then every book after that was just better.
Yeah.
And they were really hard to play with because their troops were not good in general. They really relied on their characters, but it got too easy at that point in the game to just target characters and take them out too soon.
Right.
Because it was once you killed the Hierophant, which you chose one of your characters that could do magic to be the Hierophant, and if that character died, then your army started to crumble, and every turn you lost more and more models, which was just demoralizing. Yeah, I almost said debilitating, but I was like, that's not the right word.
Also that. And what was the other thing? Like, because they were immune to psychology, what was the thing where if you lost combat or whatever?
Yeah, it was called unstable. So if
Yeah.
you lost combat, instead of potentially fleeing, you just, by however much you lost combat by, you'd take that many wounds from the unit. So they would just die. But you could bring them back. They did make magic a little bit better for them, where like every spell they cast, if you cast it on a unit that had lost wounds, you could give it wounds back with a spell. So they're really slow too. They couldn't march, so they could move like 4 inches up. But if you cast one of their spells was like the Winds of Nehekhara or something that would give them another move, and then it could also raise their guys back.
Yeah.
Not nearly as good as vampire raising magics, unfortunately. So once the vampire books came out, it was like, if you're gonna play undead, play vampires because they're just better. But they look so cool. Their lore is great. Everything about Tomb Kings was awesome except their rules, which I don't want to go too much into here, even though we already have a little bit. But
I think for me, as a player, this was not the army to start off with.
They were also difficult to use. They were a finesse army that didn't look like a finesse army.
And I have no finesse. So.
I mean, you do much more now with like Marvel Crisis Protocol, but at the time it was different. It was much more difficult to. You didn't have your head wrapped around the game to the point where you could do Tomb Kings well yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall they're super cool. I love the Tomb Kings in general. Sadly, they're no longer a thing. After Tomb Kings and Bretonnians, GW just like did dirty. After 8th, neither of them got books. I mean, Bretonnians never got books after like 2003. They didn't get a book in 7th or 8th edition. Tomb Kings did get a book. I can't remember if it was 7th or 8th edition because they got a hardcover one, but I forget which edition it was. But after that, they just got no more support at all. No new models, nothing. Age of Sigmar, they don't exist. They kind of been wrapped up. Not even like in the different undead factions. There's nothing that even resembles Tomb Kings anymore.
That's crazy.
Well, they have. There's one that's like all bone guys, but that kind of have sort of a Tomb King vibe. I think they're called the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, but I mean maybe they're kind of like the Age of Sigmar equivalent of Tomb Kings, but they don't have that strong Egyptian aesthetic. Like it's like Egyptian adjacent, I guess. It's just it doesn't work for me as well as the Tomb Kings did. They don't have a giant scorpion.
Right? Like, give me giant scorpion or give me death. I guess. I don't know.
Good try.
I'm doing my best.
But I was gonna say the top of the show, I usually talk about what's gaming, what's new, and since the last recording, I said I was gonna wait for you to come down.
Thanks.
What's new for gaming with you? since the last time you've been on, which I think was back in Skaven.
I don't know. I've probably played a couple MCP games.
Yeah, I guess since that recording you have joined, the power phase as a regular.
I wouldn't classify myself as a regular.
Yeah, well, whenever you can.
Yeah, pretty much. Especially now that Big Chuck's work schedule is a little bit more fluid, so he's able to come back. No, but yeah, I've been playing some Marvel Crisis Protocol here on the stream, Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's been super fun. I'm okay enough at it, I guess.
Yeah,
on my own, I'm undefeated.
Yeah, enough. I haven't lost by
because I've played 4 games.
Still.
So, in one of those games, Tim and I teamed up against Taylor, and we lost, but I blamed him for that.
You lost like 3 times in one game. Taylor just wrecked you guys.
Yes, he did.
It was
Here's
bad.
the thing about Taylor. He has this whole facade of like, I'm just this cute guy with cargo shorts. And then he's like insane at these games. He's so good.
He's
tactical.
Quietly.
Cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Finger across your throat means death. Like, so we did lose. Taylor played Ultron, and I don't even remember what all we played. I think I played. Was that when I played Guardians? Maybe.
I think so.
I can't remember. I think so too.
Asgard.
Yeah. Either way, so that's kind of what I've been up to as far as gaming goes, and then obviously running the Lost Omens podcast here at the Professional Casual Network.
Yeah, and that also comes out on Mondays.
Yeah.
Pathfinder 2nd Edition actual play, where you're running us through Extinction Curse.
Yep. We're almost done with the first book.
Yes. Yeah. By the time this episode comes out on YouTube, will be 2 weeks from now, so that'll be episode 24 dropping. Time of this being on YouTube, that'll be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Will be episode 23.
Yes.
And I think we are in the midst of a fight, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Time of recording, our latest episode was 21, so that means tomorrow's episode 22.
Yes.
Which
so we are in the middle of a fight. Yep.
That's a good one. In you go, nerd.
Oh my god. Best episodes to edit. Oh my goodness.
So much fun. So even if you're not into Pathfinder, who cares? Like, check it out for the characters and the story. We don't get too much into the nitty-gritty of the rules of it. We try to keep that conversation out of the game if we can. Sometimes if we're not sure about something, we'll look it up during the game and talk about it a little bit. But, I like to tell people, like, don't be worried if you don't know Pathfinder, because that's not what it's all. It's about the characters and the story. And I think we've got some awesome stuff there. And
I pride myself on knowing very few of the rules. So
it's a good thing we got a bunch of rules books around the table and access to Archives of Nethys to help us out with that. I rely on you
guys for that stuff.
You need to know the story and the monsters. That's what's important.
I have my priorities straight. I'm here for the entertainment factor. Everybody else, JB's there for the rules.
Right, yeah, he's really good at that.
That's why we have him on the show. And because he's cute. But that too.
Yeah. So that was Mondays on the Professional Casual Network. On Tuesdays, we have... wait, did I roll a wild?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that does come out.
Yeah.
It was just the shrug day for so long.
Yeah, but it's funny because we still do the shrug, like, Tuesdays. But, like, we've had Wait, Did I Roll Wild regularly on Tuesdays for, like, 2 months now. Yeah. I think this Tuesday's episode, time of recording, is just me, you, and Tim, right?
Yes. Yep.
We talked about the new releases of Mr. Sinister, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Sin and Viper, and their tactics cards and stuff like that. It was super cool.
That was fun.
Fun to talk about.
A lot of fun.
Time that this is up on YouTube, we'll be probably talking about the release of Cable Domino, Deadpool Agent Hydra Bob, and then Luke Cage Iron Fist.
Yeah. Which
hopefully will actually come out in the U.S. in early June.
Also, hopefully by that time, Chuck will be out of jail.
Oh my god. It's like we're time traveling. It's weird. But yeah, that show's super fun, where we just kind of chat about Crisis Protocol for an hour-ish, depending on. We talk about a lot of news stuff. Yeah. We talk about the game that was played the week before, that kind of thing. And then Wednesdays is our Patreon day. We have extra content for Patreon, for patrons. We have things like vlogs and...
Is that when Southland stuff comes out?
Southlands as well. Yeah, this time of recording, Southlands episode 3 will be coming out on the Patreon. If
Cool.
as Patreon, so that one's we changed things up a little bit to get because it's been going so well. We wanted more people to experience it. So where we are releasing the video version on YouTube at much delayed. I think it's going to be once a month.
Yeah.
So episode 0 of that, it's another, it's a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay 4th edition campaign of a homebrewed campaign that I've written where the party goes to the Southlands to try to set up an imperial colony. And so far it's hilarious and harrowing.
Yeah.
Herois, that's not a word.
Not a word, no.
Wow.
I was really confused. And I was like, oh, God, did he just use a word I don't know?
Yes, because I made it up on accident. But the Southlands, the podcast version is exclusive to the Patreon. The video version is new episodes every other week until we get enough. It will become weekly once we get enough episodes recorded ahead of time because we want to be ahead because it's difficult to schedule that one in at this time. But you can watch it for free on YouTube. It'll just be much delayed. So if you want to check out episode 0 and see what's going on there with the different characters, you can see that on YouTube now. On Thursdays is a Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure.
Yeah.
My favorite show. And that is our flagship actual play, I'll say.
Okay, that's fair. I was going to say, watch it. He can hear
Where-
you from Sing Sing Correctional Facility.
Where we're playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and we are playing the Enemy Within campaign, and it is a blast. It is so good.
It is fun.
Our party is amazing, and we're just having a fantastic time. I think by the time this one's up on YouTube, we will be very soon guesting on the Reinforcer podcast.
Yeah.
Where a couple of guys are talking about applied behavioral analysis,
Yeah.
which might sound very academic. They kind of the one guy, Justin, he's a doctor, so it's cool.
They're
but
both doctors.
yes, Eli's a doctor
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
The other regular host, Drew, I think is working on his doctorate.
Okay. That's cool.
But as far as I understand, Justin is like the founder of that podcast.
Okay.
He's a doctor for that kind of stuff, and he talks about reinforcement as like, what do you do to kind of get you through the day? What do you do that you kind of reward yourself with something fun to get you to do the stuff you need to do?
Mm-hmm.
And he had discovered a Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure while he was sick, and he binged the whole 52 episodes we were up to in like a week.
A year's worth of content. That's insane to me.
He said he
That's
just felt
so much.
He felt so awful from being sick that he just laid in his bed with headphones and just binged the show, and he loved it and was awesome to hear. So we check out the Reinforcer podcast. I think it's going to be their episode 10 that we're on. It'll say like
so.
RPG episode or just WFRP or something like that.
Wolfrip.
Or just check them out in general because they're cool guys and what they're talking about is really interesting.
It's a very fascinating topic. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's cool, but I'm like that.
And then Fridays we have Elite 8 Showdown with Big Chuck and Tim, and they talk about they have a 8 subject bracket where they talk about whatever
Anything.
and
And
everything.
everything.
The last episode of that came out at the time of recording was the worst person to date your child, which was their 1-year anniversary episode where they kind of went back to their first episode and kind of redid it with a slightly different topic, because the first one was the worst person to date your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So they changed the worst person to date your child with all new people except the winner of the last one.
Gotcha.
So pretty funny. Those guys, they're hilarious. Good stuff there. They had a new sound guy, William Durst,
Oh.
who makes his presence known quite well.
Okay. All right. I thought that I had like heard him down here
Yeah, he's loud.
recording. I was like, dude, I've got kids.
Yeah, he's a foul-mouthed.
I mean, birds of a feather,
I did feel a little sad listening to that episode. They're like, because Elite 8 and Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure came out like at the same week. So like we had our year anniversary last week with episode 52.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of forgot, like when we were recording, we should have said something like episode 52. Obviously that's the year.
Yep.
And it was just like, oh shoot, we forgot to even say something on mic.
We don't want to make a big deal out of it.
So make a big deal out of it
only a
here.
year.
A year in. Awesome.
So let's be like weird parents and be like, this is our 17-month anniversary.
I like to make a big deal every time we get to double episodes, like 55 or 44, because
55.
it's a critical hit in the game.
Okay.
That's fun. Like, oh, we got a critical hit this episode. Maybe
Ooh.
somebody will die.
Yeah,
No.
never mind.
Maybe somebody will use Fate Point
Much more likely.
or mutate and have to retire.
Also,
Because I think that's more likely than somebody dying anytime soon in the show. I think somebody's going to mutate to the point where they can't continue adventuring.
I think you're right, and then I'm gonna cry.
But I think that's about it for today, unless you got something else.
That's it. That's all I got. That's all she wrote.
So I do want to say I can't. It's not going to be next Sunday. It's going to be 2 weeks until episode 20, which is going to end season 1 of Grimstream Perilous Lore. I'm going to talk about vampires, and then it's going to go on a short hiatus for a little while as I kind of reformat what's to make it fit in my own schedule a little bit better. Probably once we get to summertime as a teacher. End of the year is hectic, especially this year. It's a mess. It's just nonsense. So in 2 weeks, because next week we've got other recording that's in the way of this. It's Southland's recording.
It is Southland's recording,
which
yep.
I'm really excited for.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks from today will be vampires.
What an appropriate topic as we go into summer, talking about vampire counts. Because they don't like sun.
Oh, so are you being ironic there?
Yeah, I think it's really ironic. I mean, it's our summer. Obviously, people who listen to us in the southern hemisphere, it's not their summer.
I know there's some Aussies out there that
Oi,
listen,
oi,
so.
oi. Yeah.
What was it? Go Mockingjays.
Yeah.
Who was that? Adelaide Mockingjays?
No. Collingwood.
Collingwood Mockingjays.
Not Mockingjays.
That's from
That's
Hunger
from
Games.
Hunger Games, yes.
What were they? Magpies?
Yes.
The Collingwood Magpies. I got you, Aussies. Don't worry. She
He got there eventually.
needed a lot of help. She student taught in Australia for a couple of months, so
Yeah.
that was super cool.
It was fun.
Been there.
Done that.
Ha.
Stop it.
You
Oh my
stop
God.
it. God, this is like cringeworthy for some people, I'm sure.
Yep.
But thanks for checking it out. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. The podcast version of Grimstream Perilous Lore is Patreon exclusive if you want to get it downloaded that way. Otherwise, you can check it. If you're watching it on YouTube, in 2 weeks will be vampires. So say goodbye to Cordelia and Francis.
Bye.
We'll see you
Look at him
next
work those
time, nerds. So keep gaming. Bye. My mouse turned off.
Super.